Welcome back to another episode of Ballroom Chat, a podcast dedicated to sharing the dance journey. I'm your host, Samantha, with Love.Live.Dance. Today, I'm joined by Jon Osborn. He is part of the RJ Performance Group and is a mental performance coach. He holds a master's degree in sports and performance psychology, and some of the clients that he has worked with include Real Salt Lake, the Real Monarchs, Weber State Athletics, Team X Alpine, Rowmark Ski Academy, and many more. We got a chance to sit down and talk with him today about the mindset going into performance and competitions, and a whole bunch of information about positive and negative self-talk, how to make sure that you are going in with helpful mindset, and how to prepare better for benchmarks and goal setting when it comes to competitions or performance. So if that is something that you are interested in, please enjoy my conversation with Jon Osborn. Well, thank you, Jon, so much for being a guest on today's podcast.
Hey, you bet. Really excited to be here.
So I mentioned in the introduction that you are a mental performance coach and that you hold a master's degree in sports and performance psychology. You are also the first guest on Ballroom Chat that does not have a history of ballroom dancing, did not grow up in ballroom dancing, is not currently a professional in the industry. So I kind of want to start a little bit differently than I do with my normal guests, which is if you could tell us, if you could educate all of our wonderful listeners, what does it mean to be a mental performance coach, and what is sports and performance psychology?
Yeah, for sure. But I do need to qualify. I mean, I do have a 16-year-old ballroom dance class at my high school, public
Okay.
school high school, right? So, when we say we're not in the industry, that's 100% completely accurate. But yeah, as you were saying that, I'm like, hey, I actually took a ballroom dance class in high school. I mean, by no means does that qualify me in any capacity, but it was super fun. Yeah, being a mental performance coach, what a great career, and it's been very rewarding for me. So I went and got a master's degree, as you mentioned, in sport and performance psychology. And what that schooling entailed was just trying to understand the brain and the motivations that go into human performance, and what sort of mental skills or what interventions we can use to help change the way we think, to help understand our motivations more and the ways we can intervene to help ourselves be more motivated or maybe be more committed. Um, and so as a mental performance coach, I work with performers, and I work with a lot of athletes for sure. But the way I kind of qualify that is, anybody who's involved in, high stakes, or anyone who's involved in performance of any kind. And that I've seen that go into the corporate world and business world of people. The stakes may not be, on a world championship or an Olympic setting, but the stakes are really high for that person, as this is, their livelihood. It's what they're doing to bring home the bacon for their family. And so those stakes are very personal to them. And so it's a high performance, high pressure situation in their job. And so, my job is to kind of help and ask some questions and be a good listener, and help understand, where our mental processing's at, and look at things like the way we talk to ourselves, obviously like anxiety and nerve reduction methods, whether that be like relaxation or breathing, but helping them understand and be a guide on that journey. But I say all the time that I'm trying to work myself out of a job, because I don't want to be just the go-to, right? Where it's just like, oh, I got a problem, let's go call Jon. I want them to be able to, I want people I work with to develop those skills on their own, so that when it comes up, they can solve it, work through it, and feel really confident in their ability to respond to that pressure. So that's a little bit what that's like, and it's in sport and performance psychology, because sports is one of those performances that's just so visible and is so accessible, from youth sports all the way up to like the professionals, in terms of people watching and whatnot. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background, and I think it's awesome. I'm excited, maybe a little nervous to be the first guest you have that's outside of the world, because I expect all these people watching your podcast in the world of ballroom dancing, you're going to watch the first 5 minutes and be like, this guy's a kook, doesn't know what he's talking about, So there's some pressure that I'm excited about, right? Because pressure's an opportunity for me to rise to the occasion, and I hope that I do so. So thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to see where this discussion goes.
Of course, of course. Well, and I think it's so important to have kind of a difference of opinion and to search outside of, you know, the group or the minds within our own industry, because we can learn so much from each other. So having you know, folks like you and folks outside of the industry in different areas, I think is important to further the conversation, because we can always learn from each other.
Right.
So now that we know a little bit about kind of what the idea behind sports performance psychology is, how did you actually get into this field? What was kind of the path that led you here?
Yeah, great question. And that's one of my favorite questions that I ask other mental performance coaches, because um, not all by any means, but there are a lot of people that get in because they're former athletes and they saw the benefit of like the mental game, right? That's not me. But I peaked in high school, my athletic career peaked, but I had injury. You know, I had lots of injuries that I had 4 knee surgeries from the age 16 to 22, and so injury. You know, I knew playing was no longer going to be my thing. But I remember sitting on the bench, my JV. Not sorry, not JV. My junior year varsity soccer at West Jordan High School, West Jordan, Utah, and I remember sitting there injured, and one of my best friends came out on the team. He was one of our better players. He came out and sat next to me, and we weren't awesome. You know, we maybe weren't even good. But I remember him like coming and sitting there, like being really frustrated. And and what I know now, his body language was really poor. Head was down. Wasn't looking at the game. You could tell he was just so in his head. And I remember like just kind of starting these thoughts of like, that's not going to be like very productive. Like all I can see for him is it just going downhill from here. You know, so I was just like, hey man, like keep your head up. And that's all I said to him. And didn't know why I said that, other than just, you know, it's a colloquial term, right? Like keep your head up, chin up, man. And that I just started, and he did. And I'm not sure how the game went from there. Probably not awesome. But I just remember like realizing that even though I wasn't playing, I could still make an impact. And as an injured athlete, I had lots of opportunities to not be playing. And then when I made the realization I wasn't going to be playing because of either skill in some certain sports or injury in other sports, I realized I could still make an impact. And so I just started. I kind of had that as like kind of a foundation. And then I was at school at a community college, and my sister took a sports psychology class from a guy, Dr. Rich Gordon, up at the Utah State. And she called me right after, and she's like, "Hey, John, like I don't know if you give him like sports psychology a thought, but you should. Like I think this is right up your alley." That was when I was about 18. And I remember going in, and this is how niche my schooling and market is. I remember going into my counselor's office at the community college, and I was like, "Hey, you know, I kind of want to pursue maybe a career in this. What advice do you have for me? Like, where should I go? What?" And she didn't think it was a job. Like, she didn't think it was a real thing.
Yeah.
And I was like sitting there thinking, like, already like nervous, being like, "This is fake." You know, and I was just like, you know, this is what they do, and you know, I know there's a guy up at Utah State who's doing it. How can I get, like, what do I need? You know, do I need advanced degrees? You know, where should I go to school? What prerequisites should I take? And her whole thing was trying to convince me that wasn't real. And I was like, no, it really is. And she's like, all right, then go ask that guy. And so I actually got in contact with Dr. Gordon. Anyway, served a 2-year LDS mission, came back for my mission, and was enrolled at the University of Utah, took an undergrad class, and it was my absolute favorite, because I sat there and I felt like, wow, like this is kind of where I belong. Like everything, all my gut feelings, my intuition were research backed. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know that. And so it just became that's when education like became really exciting for me. It wasn't like, you know, homework wasn't a real thing, because I was like, hey man, I want to pursue this and see what this was like. And so that was just super fun. And I mean, there was, so I finished that, you know, my undergrad out, and immediately enrolled and applied for a master's program up at the University of Utah as well. And I remember sitting my first semester, and there was a lot of doubt from friends and family. Again, probably kind of that same counselor idea of like, that's not a real job. Like, I'm sure my parents thought they were going to be like able to support me through my 40s. My in-laws were like probably not jazzed that their baby girl would be homeless or whatever. And so I had a lot of like self-doubt and a lot of imposter syndrome, where it's like, hey, this is what I'm doing. And hey, I don't think you know what you're talking about. And then it got even worse as I went into these classes with people who are now colleagues, and all of them, like their origin story, how they got in the field. And it seemed like, man, they were made for this. Former athletes, like who had a ton of experience, worked with mental performance coaches. And I'm like, I don't measure up. Like if I'm competing against these guys for jobs, that ain't never gonna happen. Like there's a lot of doubt, and probably for a lot of really good reason. But I almost gave in after my first semester. And it wasn't until I just kind of like sat back and realized that a lot of these, like that gut feeling, that intuition that I had about some of these principles, that it was still the same. So I'm not saying I'm a natural mental performance coach, but a lot of these things just started making way more sense than other concepts did. And so stuck with it, and it was that second semester and the third and fourth where I started really realizing I had a groove, and I had some ability to do this, and the ability to connect with people, and build relationships with the people I work with, and how important that is. So that's kind of my path, how I got there. A lot of doubt, a lot of stepping into the void, because it is such an unfamiliar field. I can remember a couple and I won't go into them, but I can remember a couple like pretty clear experiences with my dad and with my in-laws, like explaining what I was going to do. And just so much, my dad's favorite question he always asks is, and you can do that?
Mm-hmm.
So I tell him like, I'm going to go work with, such and such basketball team and do some sports psychology with them. And he's like, and you can do that? I was like, yeah, here's how. So that's always been kind of fun to, show him, and he's really, really supportive. My in-laws are as well. Everyone has been. But when you venture into anything that is unfamiliar to the norm, right, you're going to be faced with that stepping off point of like, hey, I really don't know where this is going to land, and here we go. And just wake up, say a prayer, hustle, and get going, and hope that it all kind of pans out.
Yeah, I adore that, because I relate to it so heavily. That idea of like, I feel something deep in my soul calling me to this career path, calling me in this direction. And everything logical around me is telling me this is bad. This is not going to happen for you. Go the other direction, find something different. This is not what's meant for you. And then just fighting it and being like, no, I'm gonna push through. I'm gonna figure out a way to make this work. And then I'm gonna hustle every single day of my life to make sure that to find that feeling of, no, I belong here. I made the right choice.
Right.
And obviously part of what you do, we were talking a little bit off stream, and obviously we've kind of mentioned it a couple times in this introduction. A lot of what you do is work with folks to push past that idea of imposter syndrome, to figure out how to cope with the anxieties and the self-doubt.
Right.
So having experienced a lot of that in your own career journey, how do you counsel your clients? What advice do you give when we're talking about imposter syndrome, or the idea of, I don't belong here, I'm not skilled enough to do X, I'm not good enough to do X,
Right.
I don't have the years of experience to do X, Y, or Z?
Right. Yeah. So true. Like even as you were talking, I was just thinking about, as you were saying, like all those thoughts that come in your head of like, I can't do that. Like I don't have the knowledge. I don't have this. I don't have that. I saw a stat recently that said 82% of people have reported feeling imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. Like 82%. Like we're sitting in a room of 10 people. 8 of us are talking about what it was like when we felt imposter syndrome. And when a percentage is that high, what kind of hits me is twofold. One is that it's very real and very normal for us to feel,
Mm-hmm.
which starts countering this idea that comes when we feel like an imposter, is that it's just us.
Yeah.
Like everyone else here is experts, and I'm the only one feeling this. So if we start normalizing the idea that's like, yeah, okay, you and everybody else feels that way as well, right? Eight people here, right? In our group of 10, there's 8 of us feeling that same way. So not only, so the first thing that it's very real, but the second thing is that it's not based in and not founded in reality. It is very real, but it's not founded in reality. Like if 8 out of 10 people are thinking that they don't belong, that can't actually be true and real, right? So it's not founded in reality. So one of the things that I think is most helpful is to help us reconnect to our reality and to what that reality is. And a lot of that comes with, first, is understanding that not all of our thoughts are true. And I think that's probably one of the most eye-popping things for the clients I work with, and because it has been for me as well, is think about how many conversations you had within your own head, either talking yourself into something, out of something, and how many times we take our own thought or that we think something, we take that now as a foundational truth, and we use that to base other decisions on, right? If I take this idea that I'm not good enough and that's truth, yeah, well, I'm not gonna go forward, right? I'm gonna make these other decisions, other avoidant decisions, based on the idea that I don't know enough. So we first break down the idea that not all of our thoughts are true. We can kind of start taking a little bit more of control of our reality and understanding like what is real and what isn't. So one of the things that I think is really, really helpful when we're battling imposter syndrome is to understand, is to remove our result from our self-worth. That hey man, we come in last place. That doesn't mean we're a last place person, right? Because that result is out of our control, out of our influence. There's so many other factors, right? And it's out of our influence. There's so many other factors related to that result. So we take that away from our own self-worth. The other thing that I think we can do is understand our efforts and applaud our efforts. I remember, Steve Young is a quarterback at BYU and played for the 49ers. I think in his book, he was talking about, he used to play outfield. And if he dropped 7 fly balls one day, or maybe he dropped 8 fly balls one day, and the next day he only dropped 7. It's like that was grounds for Dairy Queen. Yeah, he still dropped 7 fly balls, and we could focus on those.
Yeah.
But if we focus on those, those drops, we don't recognize the gain that we've made. So constantly recognizing the good things we've done. I like to use a 3-to-1 ratio when we're evaluating our performance, whether it be after a practice, after a competition, whatever. To think, what are 3 things that I did well, and then what's 1 thing that I can work to improve on, right? But recognizing those good efforts, that we're doing, I think becomes really, really important. And then just kind of removing our that failure from our self-worth, and realize that there are a lot of people around us who like us, and choose to be with us regardless of our outcomes, regardless of our performances, and that group, as we get at a higher level, might actually become smaller and smaller, because there are a lot of people who want to be around us because we're famous, or because we're really good at what we do. But there's that tight-knit circle that we realize that we I'm not gonna say we base our self-worth on those people, right? But they become our tight-knit circle we know we can trust, who's gonna be honest with us. We'll always have our back if all of a sudden that fame, that fortune goes away. That circle is always going to remain the same and always going to be there for us.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, going back to that idea of decoupling results and self-worth, just as much as like what you are passionate about and your identity, right? I am a ballroom dancer, but that is not all that I am.
Right.
And I think especially for students that are going through this process, or maybe amateurs that are just beginning their competitive career, or even professionals that have been in for a long time, I think we do focus so much on, well, I didn't make the final 6. Okay, but you made it through your first heat. You made it through quarterfinals. You got to the semifinal round. That's incredible. Like, be proud of that. Or, okay, I placed 3rd instead of 1st, but it was a brand new routine that has never been tested on the dance floor, and I got through it. Like, that's incredible. So
Right.
I totally support, I totally agree with you in this idea of like setting benchmarks and seeing the success and not focusing on, did I get the trophy? The trophy is
Right.
great, but the trophy isn't everything.
Yeah. And I think those benchmarks need to be set, or those benchmark items need to be things that fall entirely within my control or my influence, right?
Mm,
Because if I set a benchmark of like, that I want to reach the top 10, well, man, well, what if literally the 10 best people in my age group came that day, right?
yep.
Out of my control. But instead I focus on the things that are like, so like maybe, I did make top 6, but man, I literally nailed every part of my routine to the best of my current ability,
Hmm.
right? That can be a benchmark. And I know people that kind of give that a bad rap because they want these benchmark items to be really, really like measurable. And I think they
Right.
still can be. I think we can put measures on things like effort. We can put measures on things like preparation,
Hmm.
right? And so putting these benchmark things entirely in the hands of the student, of the performer, allows them to look back and grade their performance. Yeah, someone else is going to, right? There's a judge who's going to tell them what they think, and ultimately the prize is going to be rewarded on what that judge thinks. But that judge doesn't have to wake up again and do it tomorrow. I do.
Right.
And so what's gonna be the factor that gets me out of bed and keep going is if I'm relying entirely on what that judge thinks, then I might as well just go live with that judge so they can tell me what I should be doing every single day, right?
Mm.
But if I establish these benchmarks for myself and be like, hey, you know what, this last performance I achieved A, B, and C benchmark, but I didn't quite get to D. Here are some things. Here are some ways that I'm going to try and maybe change up my preparation, change up my training to achieve D the next time we go out,
Mhm.
right? But I still achieved A, B, and C.
Yeah. So I think that flows beautifully into this next question that I have for you. So I actually asked our Instagram followers on Ballroom Chat. I mentioned that you were going to be a guest, and I asked them what
Nice.
questions they might have for someone with your
They
background.
actually they actually had some questions that makes me honestly feel so good
They
that some
do.
people who don't know me would actually want to ask a question and they were like and didn't respond with like, no, you please pass. Just go to the next guest, please.
Yeah. No,
That's great. Yeah, what do they got? What can I help with?
they actually had some really great questions. So the first one comes from, and I'm so sorry, I'm going to butcher all of these usernames, but I believe it's Amesy Lady. She says, when it comes to focusing, should we aim to think about something or nothing? And she actually followed up because I wanted her to kind of explain a little bit more about exactly the question that she's aiming for. So she said for her, um, to focus during practice means something different than to focus during a competition. When we're getting ready to go on a competition floor, let's say we aren't nervous, just to remove that variable, you feel confident and comfortable going in. Should she think about a specific task, like maintaining frame, lowering, focusing on technique, or should her goal be to keep a meditative or blank mind and not linger on any thought in particular? Just essentially take the beginning of the dance and then go from there and enjoy the moment.
Right. Well, and I hate to sound lame, in answering this, or something like I'm sitting on a fence, but I've known athletes who perform best on both, right? There's some that they really just want to kind of go out there and just pay attention to like how they're feeling and not be really focused on a particular task. And if that's your cup of tea, like great. When we think about focus and focusing on one thing or trying to keep a clear mind, that's really, really difficult to do.
Mhm.
One of the best things, ways that I heard it described was that our focus is kind of like a spotlight in that it can only be focused on one thing. Just like thinking about up on a stage with that big spotlight, right? It can't be seeing everything, but it can, and it highlights and it expands or magnifies the one thing that it's on. And so oftentimes when someone comes to me and they're like, hey, I'm having a hard time focusing. what I see that as is that that spotlight keeps bouncing around different items, and sometimes that may be due to anxiety or nerves, sometimes it can be done because of the complexity of what they're trying to do. And so they think they need to think about all these different things. And so simplifying on a single task can actually be really, really important. So when someone says they're having a hard time focusing, I like to simplify and identify, one or two things to be thinking about, during this stretch of the routine. Maybe as we're starting, we're really focused on our posture. Maybe during this middle part, after I perform this move, I'm going to be, changing, to my depth or whatever it might be. But we just kind of keep and simplify, these performances, that we're going through. Like I said, I've known athletes who like that meditative state, and really it's kind of a matter of like, where do you perform at your best? Oftentimes people want just that one, like, the quick fix, the pill that's gonna, make it all go away or magical. But we're all so different, and so if you perform at your best, feeling really relaxed, great. But if that's what you want, but you notice your mind's jumping out elsewhere, that means your mind probably needs a task, and we become very, very task oriented. I would probably say that with the people I've worked with, that more people are benefit from having a task orientation than that meditative state. But it's not unheard of, I guess.
Yeah.
Does that answer her question? It was a good question. It was kind of complex, lots of pieces. Did I miss it there?
No, I think you answered it really well. And I just from like a ballroom specific mindset, and I believe the lady that's asking this question is a follower, I'm assuming. So as a fellow follow,
Right.
I would say there is kind of this balance point depending on the style of dance that you're dancing in. If I'm dancing a rhythm dance or a Latin dance where a lot of the choreography tends to be personal, in that
Okay.
we have side by side elements, we're still connected with our partner, but we're moving through figures where I have a little bit more autonomy, I guess would be the right
Yeah.
sense. I'm really going to focus on one thing for each dance that I do. So maybe in cha-cha, I want to hit my line really hard. So I'm going to make sure
Okay.
that every time I hit a crossover break, I'm going to hit that
Right.
as sharp as I possibly can. If you're dancing in smooth or standard, where the connection with the partner, you are relying on your lead so much more. It really is a more connected body and performance experience. For me, I like to go into a blank state of mind as a follower in those dance styles,
Right.
because I need to be able to react quickly if we go off script, right? If we get into a corner and we're about to get hit by another couple and my partner has to take me out of our routine, I can't be focusing so much on hitting the next line that I miss the
Right.
signal that we're about to get hit and we need to go somewhere else. So,
Right.
obviously everybody is different in that. You just mentioned, like, athlete to athlete, different things work for different people. From my perspective, as a follow, I like to go into more of that, like, zen. I'm just in the moment. I'm listening to my partner. I'm doing the routine, but I'm kind of on an autopilot from a technique perspective, and
Yeah.
I'm fully in the performance for smooth and standard. And then for rhythm and
Right.
Latin, I like to pick a specific task that I can
Right.
focus on for each dance.
Right. And it sounds like to me, just because in each of those different styles, right, that there's different relevant information,
Mm,
right? If it's something that I need to be really technical on, that relevant information is the technique, is the move I'm doing, right? Whereas if I'm trying to be connected to my partner, the relevant information is that connection. It's the chemistry that you have. And so as that's where I think about our focus becomes on my connection to this person, because I'm relying, you're relying on them to lead and guide you and kind of help you through the place. And you've trained enough that you can go on that autopilot, right?
mhm.
That you don't need to have a high level performance. You don't need to be so focused on those technical items, because if you did, the spotlight might be on the wrong thing.
Mhm.
Like if you need to be connected to your partner and let them lead and guide you where you need to be, but your focus is, on your footwork or your posture or whatever it might be, that becomes counterproductive to what the team together is trying to accomplish. That's kind of how I see that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to get your opinion on this, obviously from a different sport perspective, whether it's, your work with Real Salt Lake or any one of the high school teams that you've coached in the past or worked with in the past. I feel like there's also a sense of like trusting the process and trusting that all of the hours of practice that you've put in will show up on game time or show up on the competition floor. So if you're working on a specific goal and you've set that benchmark for the competition, obviously focus on that, but don't be so focused on it that you lose the experience of the performance or the competition experience.
Right. 100%. And you're totally right. One of the things that the people I work with that they want the most, like what do you want to feel, is like they want to feel in the zone.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had a competition or performance, like one of your dances go that you're like you were totally in the zone?
Oh, absolutely. I've had many times when
describe that to me. Explain what that felt like.
For me, it feels like from the moment that I step onto the dance floor, if I'm really prepared and my partner is really prepared, and I mostly dance with students, so just put that in the context of we're in a pro-am setting, right? When I know that I can trust my student, my partner, 100%, and I can just experience the music and experience the lights and experience the floor and experience my body moving, it's like this out of body experience. It's like I'm suddenly transported, and I'm not Samantha on a competition floor dancing the Viennese waltz. I'm Anastasia with the dress waltzing across the floor to Once Upon a December. And then you walk off the dance floor and you're like, wow, that was awesome. I don't know what just happened, but that felt amazing.
Gosh. Yes, you are describing being in the zone perfectly. What some of the hallmarks of being in the zone is that we often don't really remember it. Like we don't remember the finer details, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one of the people always want to know, like, how do I get in the zone? And that's kind of the trick of it, is that you can't actually get in the zone. You can't force yourself to be in the zone.
Yeah.
The biggest, like the number one indicator of whether or not we can do that is being able to let go. Meaning, and I think what you're, and like kind of bridge these two things, is I think it comes to trust, right? Trusting our training.
Yeah.
And trusting that, man, I put in 40,000 hours, or how I've been doing this for so long that we can trust that, that I can let go. I don't need to micromanage every performance or every, single part of what I'm doing. A few years ago, I had opportunity to work with the Riverton baseball team. They were good group of baseball players, and they're trying to go win a state championship and whatnot. And I remember right before they started the state championship, we went in there in our session together. Is I asked them, I was like, okay, I want you to stand up if you've been playing baseball longer than 20 years. Or maybe I did the opposite. Like, stand up, sit down if you played baseball less than 2 years. Mm. Sit down if you played less than 3, less than 5, less than. And what they started realizing is my numbers kept getting higher as I was like 6 years, and everyone's still standing. 7 years, all of them are still standing. 8 years, all of them are still standing. What they started realizing was like, oh my gosh, what I'm about to go compete in, I've been doing this even from a T-ball level. Like, we get it, but I've been doing this for a long time. Because our mind starts remembering. That's not just years, right? I've been doing this 8 years. We start remembering what has been involved in each of those 8 years. That it's like, man, I remember that one summer that I practice every single day for 3 hours each night. In that 1 week, I put together 18 hours of practice. And that was just 1 week in one of those 8 years. So I did that, and that was kind of my message to sending them off into this, into the state tournament, was, you guys have been doing this for a really long time. you don't need to micromanage your performance. Go out there and trust your training. Instead of thinking like, hey, what should I do at this at bat? Man, think about all the times you've been there before. Trust that, you know what, I've been in this situation enough that I can go and just kind of feel my instincts and trust those. They went out and they had a great tournament. They were the eventual state runners up, but pushed them to the very final game. And they had a great tournament, and it was really cool to like be involved in that because they really did just like trust their training. There were so many occasions in that tournament where they were put into situations that was not the norm, but they had been there before. I'm thinking of a center fielder who like all of a sudden was like called into pitch, and like he wasn't in the rotation to pitch, but needed to because of pitch count and all that in amateur sports. And he came in and like remembered that he had like pitched before in his life, and he got them out of a jam that eventually led them to advance into the next round. But yeah, when we trust our training, it allows us and sets up those opportunities for us to let go, and gives us a good chance of having those moments of where we're in the zone, or having, like you said, having those out of body experiences. But I love that because we can't force ourselves to be in the zone. Like, all right, I want to be in the zone. Here we go. We got to be able to have the maturity to be able to step back and recognize, hey, I've done this a lot. Like I've practiced a lot, even recently. We don't need to have years and years, right? But we're like, hey, this isn't the first time I'm doing this dance. This isn't the first time I'm dancing with this partner. We have some good chemistry. We've been through some things. I trust that they've been doing training because I've actually been there with them. I know they have been as well. And so I don't need to micromanage their performance. They don't need to macromanage mine because we both trust each other. And I trust myself where I don't need to micromanage my own performance. I don't need to nitpick every single element of this, of this footwork, or this, dip or whatever it might be. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. But I do want to flip that though. So I feel like one of the pitfalls that a lot of beginners fall into is working with someone that has been doing it for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years.
They want the person with experience.
Well, they want the person with experience, which is absolutely correct. But then judging themselves and their progress against where this expert is, similar to if an NFL current player came in and taught Pee Wee football, and the Pee Wee football student is like, well, why don't I move like them? Why am I not there? I want to look like that. How do I get there? So what advice would you give for beginner athletes or beginner hobbyists that are starting their journey in ballroom dance or in any sport, any performance avenue, to kind of put their goals and expectations in line with where they want to be eventually?
Right. Yeah, I think the advice I give them is, recognize that you're a work in progress, not a finished product. That we want progress. It's about progress, not perfection. I think that's probably the advice that I give them. And I just barely talked with an individual, maybe just a couple of weeks ago, about this exact idea. He was so hard on himself. He's a really high level basketball player. He's only 16 years old, but playing at a really high level in a very competitive environment. And he was getting really hard on himself about, if I want to make the, if I need to make the NBA, I need to be shooting this percentage, and I'm not right now. And he was like, lots of statements like that. And I was like, you're not in the NBA. and he's like, and it was like so eye-opening for him to realize, like, oh, okay, yeah, where I'm at right now does not need to be what I need to be doing in this final product. So if we start recognizing that we're not, we're works in progress, we're not finished products. So if we start viewing ourselves in that way, like, okay, if I'm a work in progress, well, what would I expect to see from myself? And we start seeing certain behaviors. Mistakes would be one of them, right? If I'm a work in progress, I'm gonna have mistakes. I'm gonna have failure. I'm gonna have learning opportunities. If I'm a finished product, yeah, we don't want mistakes, obviously we always want learning opportunities, right? But what we expect to see from ourselves in terms of behaviors are totally different if we are a work in progress versus a finished product, right? We don't look at the painting hanging in the Louvre and we're like, oh, that they're making some great progress. Like that's a finished product. We're looking at an absolute masterpiece. But if we go look at my 3-year-old's drawing, we're not like, dude, why on earth did you not? Don't you realize that you have 3 places for light here? Are there 3 moons, right? Are there 3 suns? No, we don't get mad at that, right? Because they're a work in progress. And so we start seeing ourselves that exact same way, In the situation you're talking about of like, a beginner with someone with so many years of experience, one of the things I think is so important is like asking questions, is, okay, great, your partner has 10 years more experience than you. Right, they're going to perform at a higher level, but man, what sort of questions can you ask them? What advice would they give to themselves 10 years ago? What advice do they have for you? And like asking that opportunity. So not just a great opportunity to learn to dance from someone who knows so much more than you, but what sort of questions could you ask them? What sort of things could they maybe tell you to speed up your learning? That you don't have to go through 10 years to get where they are. But can you be a good listener, and can you be coachable? Can you be teachable, that maybe that 10 years only takes 5, or whatever, however we want to qualify it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we see ourselves as like the finished product, or we see what they're doing, and now that becomes the criteria for what we're doing, then it becomes really, really demotivating, because it's just not real. It's not reality. And we're just, we're playing a video game at that point, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. A couple different thoughts that I had during your answer there, which I think honestly was so fantastic. One was just a motivational quote that I came across a couple years, which was something along the lines of, "Thanks to dance, I no longer say I can't. I say I will. I just need time to practice." Right.
Oh, I
And that
love that.
idea of I, I I might not be able to do it today, but just give me enough time and I will be able to someday.
So cool.
I can't do the Latin walks that Yulia or Joanna can do, but give me time and maybe one day I'll get there. Same thing with my beginner students. They might not be able to do the same, hip action that I have at the moment, but give them enough time and I'm sure that they'll get there. And then one of the
it reminds me of the power of yet, right? It's one of it's probably a really quick fix in terms of our mindset of where we're at, right? Like, I can't do this ... yet. And it's so quick and easy to do, but it totally changes the procedure or the product, or the process of what we're doing. Is if I can't do this, that's a final statement, and we stop trying. But like, I can't do this yet, it's like, yeah, I can't do this yet, but man, with enough time, with some practice, with some training, I know I'll be able to, or I'm going to work my hardest to be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah, the power of yet. What a powerful concept.
Yeah. And then I love your analogy with the idea of when we look at a painting at the Louvre, we see a finished product. But there are also those, art historians or students that are really studying the great masters of art that will go through a Van Gogh experience and say, okay, look at this painting versus this painting and see how he's starting to play with, texture or color or X, Y, and Z. So even those people that we think of as greats are still refining their technique and still playing with their art and seeing how they can change. And it's the same for athletes. We never stop going back to the basics. We never stop going back to the fundamentals to see if we can improve and change and develop and evolve.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It is really cool to see those ones, or see those people we see as great. Yeah, see them change over time. And I think you can see, I see that in the sports world a lot with some athletes that change the way they play their sport over time. Maybe they're really athletic when they're younger, and now they start getting a little smarter and play differently, but they still are so great, and they change and they adapt because they need to, or they change and they adapt because it's what like feels right to them. And that's what I think it happens so much with these, these great artists is, they change and they play with new techniques and new styles because I think it's what speaks to them, right? Now, and think about if they had it fixed in their mind of like what they should be or what they do. Like, no, I don't paint that way. This is what I do. We maybe never actually get to see some of these great works of art simply because they put themselves, into a box. As you're asking me that, I also think about, I can't remember if it is the Mona Lisa, but there's a great work of art that most people agree is actually like not very good, or that there is riddled with mistakes. And I love that. That is like one of my favorite things is that this thing that is perceived as great and beautiful is actually riddled with mistakes. And I'm like, if that isn't the greatest parallel for the human experience, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
The people, and maybe that's exactly in kind of getting back to imposter syndrome, right? Is us sitting here experiencing, they're like, oh my gosh, there are so many mistakes with this. Or we look in the mirror and we're like, there are so many mistakes with the way you do things. But other people looking at it are like, my goodness, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that the most magnificent performance that we've ever seen? But to the person, it's like, there's so many mistakes in this.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea of giving yourself grace and giving yourself the room to appreciate the moment that you're in and the journey that took you there and the journey that's still ahead of you. I want to ask one more question from Instagram, and then there's another conversation that I'd like to see if we can get into. But first, we have a question from Eric Onomics. Yes, Eric Onomics. He says tips and strategies tips and strategies for connecting with a partner and having presence on the floor, aka how to dance big or be seen in a large competition floor like Ohio Star Ball. So a little bit of context for this. Ohio is one of, if not the largest competitions that we have here in the United States. And depending on what you are competing in, I believe this individual, because I've spoken with them a little bit in the past, is competing in collegiate. So they're a college student. When I competed at Ohio in collegiate ballroom in 2010, there were 230 couples that were competing in the bronze syllabus category, which means you were competing against 230 other couples. They tended to put somewhere between 30 and 35 couples on the floor in the first round heats. And then you would whittle down from round one. You might get a call back. So you would go from 230 down to 150, then from 150 down to 68, then from 68 down to 32, 32 to 16, 16 to 8 couple final. And it is incredibly difficult to make it out of round one. And if you make it out of round one, it's incredibly difficult to get out of round two, mainly because it's hard to be seen with 30 other couples on a 40 by 60, 60 by 80 floor. So I would kind of equate this similar to, I don't know if there's I think the NFL Combine, you have one person at a time going through and being judged and kind of being timed. But what is your kind of advice for standing out from the crowd or being seen in a very large competitive environment, to make it past round one, round two?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just think of perspective is what is where my mind goes with this is, and now in meaning let's start asking some questions from the perspective of the judges, right? Okay, if I'm a, some questions asked. If I'm a judge, what am I looking for? If I'm a judge, what stands out to me? So let me ask you that. Let's pretend you're the judge, right?
Yeah.
So what are some things that would stand out to a judge?
Depending on the level, if we're talking bronze, silver syllabus, posture, how you take frame, are you on time with the music? And that's probably all I'm going to be able to see with 30 couples on the floor and a minute 15, a minute 5 per dance. Past that, maybe I'll look at like what patterns they're using, what their footwork is, but 30 couples in a minute, posture, frame, are you on time?
Awesome. And what I love, I mean, with my very limited understanding, so you tell me if I'm actually wrong on this.
Yeah.
But every single one of those things are in my control, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, right. So what I think about is the strategy that I use is I'm thinking about a routine, right? And not just like this is a routine in a different sense, but I like to think of it as like a funnel. You know, we all have funnels in our kitchens, right? The funnel is to take large things or large quantities and bring them through a small opening. And that's what I'm thinking. If there's 30 other couples, that's our large thing. So our funnel is what we're trying to get out, right? But what that funnel idea also does is helps kind of refocus or helps bring our focus in preparation and training into those areas, right? So that's where my advice would be is if what we're trying to kick out is we're not actually trying to kick out a really good performance. What we're trying to kick out is posture, staying in our frame, or the keeping the rhythm. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Being on time.
So that being okay. So being on time. So that's what I'm trying. Those are the things that I'm actually trying to get out of this particular funnel. So if I think about that, I think that changes the way that I prepare. Do you think so?
Oh yeah. I know
Okay.
that my partner in college and I trained differently for Ohio than we did other competitions because we just knew the size of the competitive field. And then if we made it out of round 1, round 2, and we were suddenly in quarters or semis, then we switched back to, okay, now let's, we've survived. They found our number. We made callbacks. Now let's kick it into high gear and really go for what we've been training for.
Right. And that's kind of what stands out to my, in my mind. I remember when I was in 7th grade, we had an assembly with like a self-made millionaire, and he came and talking to our whole school. So there probably would have been like 700 or 800 of us, I guess, ballpark number. And we're all in our big auditorium, and he holds up $100 bill. He's like, I'm going to give this $100 bill to the first person who actually captures my attention. So he's like, and he stares out into space. And so obviously everyone like jumps up, starts screaming like, over here, trying to make us big. The guy who actually ended up getting it, he took off his shoe and threw it at him. But he gave us a good lesson that obviously is still memorable to me, right? In terms of like what gets people's attention. And that's what we're trying to do in this situation, right? Is to get people's attention. You talks about bright colors, they're obviously gonna get people's attention. But the fear of something being thrown at me, I'm immediately gonna be like paying attention to that. But again, I think of it in terms of like focus. Like when he's looking at this group of 800 people, and he only has a searchlight, he only has a spotlight. What's gonna get his spotlight on the right thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it comes down to that from the judge's perspective, like what's going to stand out.
Yep.
And so when we talk about presence, we want to have presence on the floor. What that really means is I want to stand out, and like what stands out. All these people are going to be really good at what they do. So me being really good isn't going to stand out. My focus shouldn't be on being really, really good. All of these people are going to be dressed very nicely, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't need to worry about being dressed nicely because that's not going to stand out because I'm trying to stand out, right? I mean, you can take that and flip that on its head by being like, if I don't dress nicely, that's going to stand out, but in the wrong way, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to stand out in the right ways. And the ways that stand out is looking at from that judge perspective, what is it? And in this situation, it'd be our posture, staying in our frame and being on time. Then those are the things that we focus on. And the reason why I asked you is if they're in our control is because in our weeks and months leading up to competition, that becomes our judgment of our quote unquote success for each training that we went through. Is, not, hey, this one felt really good, not, hey, this we did really well, we would have scored really well, but did we stand out? Did we have these three elements that would make us stand out? Because maybe you performed really, really well, that in an individual setting, you would have graded really well. But that's not what we're actually trying to get to in this situation. We're trying to stand out. And we're looking at what, from the judge perspective, what is it that does stand out? So we identified those three things, and those become our benchmark. Hey, our posture was really good. We stayed in our frame, but we weren't on time. Great. Okay, we were 2 for 3. All right. What do I need to do to be more on time? All right. We kind of take care of those things. The next day, we were on time. We took care of that, but our posture wasn't great. All right. We work hard on those, those three things, or those identifiable things, not to the point where we can't, where we don't forget to do it, but where we practice it so much where we can't not do it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just another 2 very silly tips, but effective tips. Remember that the judges can't recall you if they don't know what number is on your back. So position yourself on a dance floor where your number is the first thing that judge sees. And make sure that as you go past every single judge, because they tend to be spread out around the floor, that they can see your number. Because if they can't see your number, they can't recall you. And then the second thing is, if you're part of a large university group, have a cheering squad screaming your number as loud and as frequently as they can. Because again, these judges, and we've had them on before. I think one of the very early episodes I did with Kimberly Mitchell, she actually went into this. So if you are listening and you have questions about Ohio, go back to that interview, because I think she talked about this specifically. Judges only have a minute. And if there are 30 couples on the floor, that means every couple, if they tried to see every couple, gets 2 seconds. So there is a good possibility that the end of the round comes and they're counting down their sheets, and you know what? They didn't mark down enough numbers. So what are they going to write down? They're going to write down the number that they've been hearing yelled, because they want to then see what that couple is, who that couple is, if they're not already on the sheet. So remember that your number is the ticket to get you through round 1 and round 2, and make sure that you use that as frequently as you can.
Right. I like that. That's the relevant information, right?
Yeah.
That's the relevant information. Our number to make it through is our number. I think that's great. And a cheering section, I think that's so cool. And again, I'm loving having this conversation because I'm learning about ballroom, right? And ballroom competition and the things that are involved, because this will benefit me for years to come, just simply by knowing more. I love this. But I talk all the time about how the great ones know that it takes a team. The great ones in an individual sport, in an individual competition, they have and they know it takes a great team behind it. That could be your coaches, your trainers, your sports psychs, whatever. But they understand that it takes a team. And so in that situation, if you come from a large group, have that team behind you shouting your number. If you come from a small group, man, are you allowed? Are you allowed people to come? Is it parents? Is it aunts? Is it your best friend who's got the loudest voice? Man, wouldn't that be powerful if they were just, from different areas, like, hey, nice job, 19, or whatever.
Yeah.
Man, if I'm sitting on a basketball court and I'm sitting watching and I hear something, hey, nice job, 19, I'm immediately trying to find 19, right?
Right.
So if they're spouting off, and just calling my number, I think oftentimes, our like parents particularly, they're there to like cheer us on. With this situation, it's like, I don't so much need you to cheer me on. I need you to help me get noticed.
Yeah.
I need you to help me get recognized. So it said, hey, go John, cheer my number, because Judge doesn't know me as John. Judge knows me as number 19,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. Well, and I certainly have friends that, hated when their parents came to watch because they got nervous or anxious or whatnot. But for me, if the crowd is loud, even if they're not cheering for me, even if they're just cheering for someone else on the floor, but if there's energy in the room, that gives me an extra boost to perform a little bit better because it feels like the audience and the crowd is on my side, even if that's not the reality. If the
Right.
auditorium is silent, that's like the worst feeling as a performer because then it's like, well, nobody's paying attention to what I'm doing. Nobody's appreciating what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah, it comes down to our arousal levels, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm thinking there are probably, and maybe there are probably some performers that actually kind of love a quiet gym,
Yeah.
a quiet arena, because then, and all, from my perspective, it all comes down to our arousal levels. Sometimes there are some performers that they need their arousal to be really high. They want that heart rate elevated. They want they want the environment to like really buzzing with energy. Then there are some performers that they perform really well when things are like calm, and there isn't that like fear and that pressure of expectation. So yeah, it kind of comes down to, I just think like there are people listening who hear your experience and are like, oh shoot, I'm the opposite. Like when the arena's going, like I start freaking out a little bit.
Mm.
Those of you out there, that just means that you prefer your arousal level to be a little bit lower, taking some deep breaths in the middle, during, before that, that performance. That's going to help lower your heart rate, maybe help feel a little bit more calm, a little more in control in those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, I know we are going a little bit late, but there was one conversation that I really wanted to have with you if you are okay on time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so we had talked a little bit before today's episode just to kind of get a sense of each other because this was kind of our first meeting.
Right.
And you had mentioned something that you were kind of passionate about talking about and that I really think would benefit our listeners, which is the idea of figuring out what is helpful self-talk and what is unhelpful self-talk. So can you talk a little bit to me about that concept and what it means to have helpful or unhelpful self-talk?
Right. Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, so powerful and such a valuable concept to understand. I think if I could have any of your listeners to like start on this path of excellence, I think the first step of excellence is self-awareness. And when I say self-awareness, I probably mean lots of different things, but one of those is what we're saying to ourselves, the tone that we're saying it to ourselves in, and also the products of it, right? So really kind of simply, helpful, unhelpful is just kind of looking at the products of this. Is we can take a negative emotion like frustration, let's say, and let's think of like a frustrated statement I might say of like, man, dude, you got to be better than this, right? Sounds really negative, born out of frustration. But if that frustrated statement, if it helps me, if it inspires me to be better, if it motivates me to try more, that right there just became helpful self-talk. Whereas if you got to do better, and it leads me down a path of all the times that I haven't been enough, or all the ways that I'm not good enough, or that I haven't done better, then that same thought, same idea becomes unhelpful self-talk. So starting with some self-awareness, like what are the things that I'm saying to myself, and then what are the products of that? So many people in my field, and I'm sure I've done this time and time again, where we preach and we hit so hard on this idea of like needing to be positive, all the time. When we face setbacks, we gotta answer with positivity. Well, there are so many athletes who combat that immediately, where they're like, well, if I made a mistake, I'm pissed. Like I'm mad about that. And so you just want me to like turn that anger and be just like, oh no, everything's good. Well, Jon, it's not good. Like I just made a mistake. Possibly I just made a critical mistake. So that's where I like this idea of helpful and unhelpful. It's like, okay, you're pissed, you're mad, you're frustrated at the mistake. All right. So what are the things you're saying to yourself? I suck, I'm not good enough, whatever it is. Okay, which of those statements are helping you? Meaning that your performance is going to improve because of those. Well, let me tell you, I don't think the statement "I suck" has ever helped anyone improve their performance. So that becomes an unhelpful form of self-talk, or unhelpful to our improvement, right? So that's something I'm always trying to teach people is becoming aware of the things you're saying, and then is it productive? Is the thing I'm saying, is it productive? And sometimes that negative emotion, that frustration, that anger, sometimes for certain people it is productive. And to those, I'm good with it. I'm good with you being mad at yourself, really, really hammering in on yourself if it's productive. But if it's not productive and you just like doing it because it makes you feel better, or makes it feel like I care a lot. That's probably the one of the things that stood out to me the most is people think people are saying these negative things to themselves as an outward showing to the audience, or to the spectators. I want them to know how much I care. Like, I'm going to sit here having a grown up tantrum because I want everyone to know how much I care about that outcome. I'm so mad I let that goal in. I'm so mad I missed that shot. I need to show everyone how much I care. But really, like, internally, it's not doing anything in terms of being productive. So that's kind of the question I ask. Like, as we become more aware of the things we're saying, is it helpful? And if it is, great. Is it true? Those are probably the two big questions. Like, is that true? Like, man, I suck at this. I can't ever do this. Is that true? Well, no. Like, we talked about power of yet. Like, it's not true. What's true is that you can't do it yet, but it's not very true. And then the second one's helpful, because even if that statement's true, like, man, I suck at this, man, that's true. Yeah, I really am not very good at this. But is it helpful? No.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not true, if it's not helpful, then it's definitely not going to be productive. And so we want to, those are the statements that we want to change and reinforce. I'm perfectly okay with the emotion. I think that's kind of the purpose of this idea of like acceptance commitment therapy, is that it's okay for us to feel and experience whatever, maybe the good and the bad. It's okay. We don't need to judge ourselves. I think that's a big thing performers get in their way with, is that we experience something, and particularly with the negative emotions, I've noticed that, like, we get mad and we get frustrated, and then there's a whole nother layer that jumps on top of that, because now we're mad and frustrated that we got mad and frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
I'm better than this. I shouldn't be mad. I shouldn't be frustrated. Well, think about if we just accept that. It's like, yeah, I'm really upset about this because this one really mattered to me. Okay, I'm mad. I've accepted it. But what am I going to do from it? It's the idea of like embracing the suck, but not staying in the suck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm embraced suck. I'm frustrated. What am I going to do with it? Can we take that frustration? Can we take the anger, and can we turn it into something productive? If that means more one-on-one time, more time training, great. If that's what's needed. Personally, I don't think always the answer is just spend more time, right?
Yeah.
Maybe what we need to work on is our routine next time. Thinking like our pre-performance routine, what we do to get ourselves ready. Maybe we need to work on our mental game, the way we think about ourselves. Maybe we need to spend some time re-watching some times when we've done things really successfully. Maybe I need to spend some time talking to coach more and becoming a little bit more coachable. But we can take all of those, whatever it is we're feeling is okay, and just asking ourselves that question of like, is it helpful? Is this thought helpful to me? Meaning, is it productive? Is it going to lead to what I want? And if the answer is yes, great, we go with it. But if the answer is no, then that's something we want to cut off, and we want to try and change, and I guess not cut off. So we just want to try and find something, or say something to ourselves that is productive, and that's where like the power of yet, or that motivational quote that you shared of like, I'm not there, but I will be with time, with practice, with training, with opportunity.
Yeah. I want to flip that on its head real quick. I fully agree that there are helpful and unhelpful comments, and I think you're kind of guiding light of, is it true, and is it going to motivate the proper outcome? I think those are two really good guiding lights. Does that also hold true with positive statements that can inherently be hurtful. One of your colleagues, Riley, has a podcast, and I think it was an episode ago or maybe two, he was talking about positive thoughts and positive emotions when it comes to injury recovery. And I kind of was listening to it, and I had this question of, but is saying I can get through this, I'm strong enough to get through this, potentially also hurtful at a certain point? Or how can we distinguish between I'm strong enough to keep going and listening to our body and saying, no, I really do need to give myself some time to rest?
So nuanced, right?
Yeah.
So nuanced. I think about something I read a while ago that talked about um, uh, people put in like life and death situations, like particularly like stranded in an avalanche or stranded at sea. The indicator of like whether or not or not indicator, but their highest likelihood of survival was not positivity. There was actually the ones who were like, hey, you know what? Someone's going to come save us tomorrow. That type of thinking were actually the ones that ended up dying, because that disconnect from what is actually happening here, is damaging and can be damaging in the long run. Like if I'm stranded at sea and I have, a day's worth of rations, like 24 hours worth of rations, and I'm like, hey, they're gonna be saved tomorrow, and I just burned through everything.
Yeah.
But hey, they don't show up tomorrow. But I could have spread this 24 hours worth of rations out over 7 days and given myself some more time, right? So, I think it's a military phrase of like hope for the best, but plan for the worst, right? Of hoping that I'm going to be saved tomorrow, but I'm going to plan on the event they're not. I think this was really big, and maybe this is where the idea comes from from Vietnam POWs that we're put in some really rough and terrible situations, and that if we just always think it's going to, tomorrow is going to be better, great. It's okay to have that frame of mind, but it's behaviors that come from that, right? And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that same idea that I talked about of helpful, unhelpful can be exactly true for positive, positive statements. It's like we have a bad performance. It's like, all right, we'll get them next time. Great. Is that helpful, or is it true? We don't know, right? And that's the purpose of competition. We don't know if that's true. But is it helpful? Is it productive? Well, if there are actually some things that I need to work on, but I say, oh, we'll get them next time, and I don't work on those because I'm just thinking next time is going to be the time, then that became unhelpful and not productive, right? So that's where we can take, some really critical statements can be said in a positive way. It can be really productive for us. Even when things aren't always positive, we can at least be productive. And it's like, hey, today wasn't my day, but if I work on my posture, if I work on my timing, I can be pretty good, right? And it gives us some productive things to actually look on, some tangible, some tangible items.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jon, so much for being a guest today.
Dude, thank you. This has been awesome.
I feel like we could talk for another hour and 15 minutes, but
yeah, when you said time was up, I was like, no, it's not. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, this has been so good.
Any last thoughts or any last pieces of advice that you want to leave our listeners with today?
There's power in positivity, but more importantly, there's power in production. I think about the excellent people that I know in whatever craft they are, and excellence is really kind of contagious. Meaning, that as we pursue excellence in one area of our lives, we start seeing gains in those others. So I think the final thing that I would just want to leave with is like recognize the impact of these other areas of your life. And try to become, an A+ person, on your path to becoming an A+ competitor, because those other areas really kind of impact the way that we're able to perform.
Awesome. And if folks want to work with you or learn a little bit more about what it is that you do, how can they find you?
Yeah, follow me on Instagram or Twitter. My handle's the same thing. It's at JOzzyPsych. Or they can find us on our website. It's www.rjpg.net. They can learn more about our group. And like you said, there's a few colleagues and some people that can help out, and they can get in contact with me there. I'd love to hear from people who listen to what they thought, or if there are any follow-up questions, send them my way. I'm happy to answer them.
Yep. And you guys are based out of Utah, but you coach nationally, correct?
Yeah, we got people we work with all over. Thanks to things like Zoom or phones, right? Phone and email. Yeah, we work with people all over the place. But yeah, our office is here based in Salt Lake.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jon, once again for being a guest today.
Awesome. Thanks, Samantha. Really appreciate you.
Thank you once again to Jon for being a guest on today's podcast. As we mentioned, if you want to find out more information or just follow him on social media, you can do so using the links in the description box below. As always, I'm Samantha. I'm your host with Love.Live.Dance. You can follow Ballroom Chat on all of our social media pages at Ballroom Chat on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a Patreon at Ballroom Chat if you want to support the podcast. And you can find all of our video episodes at the Love.Live.Dance YouTube page, or you can find it Ballroom Chat on all of the podcast platforms. If you have not already done so, please do make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe, or follow, depending on the platform that you are listening to this podcast on. And as always, stay safe, stay positive, and we hope to see you dancing very soon.